right, that was a lot of good insights, a lot of advice for entrepreneurs to boldly go where these guys haven't gone before. It looks like a plug for the new Star Trek movie. So you heard a lot about data center in this panel, right? And that's where the early adoption has happened for SDN. What we wanted to do was sort of say, hey, how do you go beyond SDN? And that's what our next speaker is going to help us do. So our next speaker is Victa McClelland. He is VP of Technology Strategy in the Internet Services Group at Ericsson. He's part of the CTO organization driving the technology strategy for Ericsson. He's had a lot of experience being on the service provider side of the house. He has worked at Telstra, Vodafone Hutchison, and several other service providers prior to joining Ericsson. And Victa, if you could give us a perspective on how do you go from the data center into the WAN, talk about wireline networks, wireless networks, and sort of how SDN really plays in the network infrastructure. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I will try and do that. So we have some slides over there. Yes, is there a problem to be solved with SDN for the service providers? I think that probably there is. So what does the world look like for service providers? There's good and there's bad. The good is that, of course, there is lots of data growth in the networks for the service operators, for the service providers, primarily around video. We know this story. We know that it's doubling every year, and probably from my discussions with service providers, probably even more than that. We have a lot that are even 4 times a year. But on the bad, so that's on the good side. On the potentially bad story, if you look at the graph on the right, we know that operators' costs are escalating, and we know that revenues are relatively flat, if growing or even going negative. So here is the opportunity. When operators see graphs like that, they will act. They will have to do something. And what is causing that? Of course, SDN is not the answer to all of that. Some of that network cost is because operators are building out user experience with coverage in the network, for example. But also some of that is because the networks are not scalable. The architectures we have today are very vertically integrated. Whenever some new technology comes along, operators have to implement that right across the scale, everything from the hardware, the software, the operating systems, and the people that operate it. So they have to retool and reskill for every new technology. And so they're looking for horizontal solutions that can, if you like, isolate some parts of that pain when they implement new technologies. SDN can be part of that answer. It's not all, but it's certainly part of that answer. What are the operator expectations then? Of course, operators have an expectation that there will be some sort of reduced costs in their network infrastructure. And we see that, therefore, they will be implementing new network technologies, flattening out their networks. They are looking at how they can take the synergies with cloud. And that's, when we talk about cloud, it's not just from a perspective of reducing costs by, if you like, flattening out the architectures and maybe reducing some operations costs. But we see the advantage of potentially linking the network, the WAN, with the cloud is to allow some sort of flexibility in deployment models for networks. So if you have, of course, flexibility on where you put different components within the network, then that then isolates operators from this complexity of having to maintain new technologies as they come in. And then, of course, we see that the ability to have the network more programmable, more customizable, in theory, also allows the service providers to increase the rate of change, increase the rate of introduction of new technologies, and potentially link that through the APIs or the protocol interfaces into third parties who can create innovation on top of the network. So these are the operator expectations. Then what do we think is the demands on the new generation of network, the new generation of technology. So we believe, and operators tell us this every day, that the networks need to be scalable, not only from a dimension of handling more data, but of course from a dimension of handling more signalling within the network. The networks need to be simple. They need to be simple to operate. They need to be flat. And part of that is understanding, if you like, what is the relevance of the network. So if networks continue to be more and more complex as we roll out more vertical new technologies, then there's pretty much no way for somebody who wants to program the network to understand that. And the networks need to be smart. They need to be smart in such a way that allows for innovation, allows for third parties to create this dynamic new rate of change to the network. But more than anything, the networks need to have superior performance. I think the panel mentioned it before. Probably the most important aspect for service providers today is customer experience. If the networks do not provide good end-to-end experience between the applications and the users, of course the users will not use the network. It's a good thing for operators to generate more usage on the network, but they will not do that if, for example, they can't watch a video on their tablet when they're on the train. So end-to-end performance is one thing that we think needs to be linked together with these other aspects. So what does that mean for SDN? What do we think about SDN? Yes, SDN is about linking more than just the SDN capabilities in the cloud, in the data center. It's about, for us, it's about linking that across into the network. It's about linking control and management aspects from the access part of the network to the IP and core part of the network across into the data center, so that you can dynamically bring up some cloud compute and storage with some WAN connectivity, so that you can distribute analytics out to the end of the network instead of bringing back so much big data back in centrally when that use case requires that, or when that use case can manage it that way. And it's about connecting the network to the applications with some sort of higher order value that's easy to consume, easy to program, and understandable by the software developers of the world that really don't want to bother with the complexities of the network. So we see this has got some sort of end-to-end nature, and it's got some sort of, if you like, vertical connection nature to it. That's what we believe about service provider SDN, connecting from the cloud to the WAN. So what are some examples of that? We have what we call the elastic cloud WAN, which is connecting the data center to the WAN with some sort of capability that allows you to spin up compute and storage with WAN capacity dynamically. We have service chaining use cases where, for example, today the networks are quite static with what sort of network functions are linked into a service chain. We believe that SDN will allow for more dynamic, more service level linking in things like firewalls and NATs and AAAs and caching and policy control into the service chain dynamically as it's required for that service use case. So we believe that you can apply that across the network and the cloud. We believe also that SDN principles can apply in the broader, if you like, connection between the base stations and the clouds. And we believe that it can also be applied at the end in the home with a virtual home gateway sort of solution, which I will talk about next, well, not quite next. We have been active in this area. The service providers have been active in this area. So one example of that is Telstra down in Australia, where I come from. We have been working with them on service chaining use cases and virtualized aggregation network use cases. They are implementing SDN capabilities within the network today, and these sorts of use cases will be implemented probably by the end of this year in commercial practice. Virtual home gateway then, as an example. What does that mean? I think it is a good example of where SDN can apply not only in the data center but also in the WAN and also connecting to the end user devices, if you like. What this does is it pretty much allows you to have a scaled down, if you like, less smart device in the home and place a virtual home gateway in the edge, where now you can offer services to customers where they can access their broadband connection for the home, but on any internet connection from their friend's house. They can access the services that you apply to that on any internet connection. You can gain access to the things that are in the home when you're on any internet connection, or from third-party applications to create smart services for the users for things like home security services. And also the user can, of course, apply this service chaining sort of logic to apply different sort of terms and conditions, not terms and conditions, but different sort of features to the service for the individual users in the house. Things like my son might require more parental controls, more filtering added to the service, and my wife might want a better, higher quality of service to watch neighbours on TV, those sorts of things. So that seems to be quite a good end-to-end use case that service providers are already trialling. So conclusions. What are the service provider expectations? Yes, we believe that there is some expectations around cost management, but primarily the expectations there are around flexibility in the network. Flexibility for service case development and flexibility for how you deploy things within the network. And we do believe that service provider SDN is an enabler of that across the network, from the access part of the network to the IP edge and core part of the network and into the data center. We do believe that SDN principles should be applied as a control mechanism across all of those areas. And we believe that that will allow a higher degree of real dynamic programmability on top of those domains, which can be, of course, used by the service provider to create their own services on top of the network, but also can be applied by third-party companies to create new, innovative solutions to really, if you like, gain speed for the service providers in their new revenue growth. And that is it. Thank you.